So I just loaded in the photos from yesterday. I haven't looked at anything. I'm nervous to look at stuff. I don't know how many images we took total. 623 images. All right, crossbow time. Crossbow. That's super good too. Why did I crop her hand out? Ugh, I'm my own worst enemy. This is a nightmare. And then here's a shot where the flash didn't fire. I missed focus on all these. This is crazy. This sucks. This again, flash didn't fire. You can tell from just the top lights, like we can tell. The smoke looks good, because that's how you light smoke. You backlight it. Now that's pretty cool. And my lighting is garbage. Damn, that's a good photo. Her expression is great. And I think she's sharp. Another great photo wrecked by yours truly. Damn it. If you're seeing any of this stuff, I'm probably dead in a ditch somewhere, because Debradawn has shot me right through the heart with that crossbow that I gave her. You guys think I'm joking. Now that is super pretty. This one, she looks a little bit psychotic. That's a good one. That is cool. That she's just laughing. That is cool. This one's great. And then there's the outright laughter of somebody stabbing you in the chest. It's strange, right? It's got this weird architecture. It's just weird. I like this weirdness. Granted, this isn't like beauty portraiture here, right? She's like wreathed in smoke. That's great. Oh, dude. That's pretty cool. Greetings, good humans, and welcome to Tabletop Alchemy, where sometimes we do activities that are only hobby desk adjacent in my apartment, and we find out whether or not we've wasted our time trying something new. And we thank our patrons for bearing with us during this niche-specific digression and bout of self-daring. So, for anyone new here, yes, this channel is typically dedicated to tabletop hobby stuff, as the intro implies, but recently I took on a little creative project that is, genre adjacent, let's say, meaning it has swords in it. And that's about it. But I often encourage folks to follow their dreams, and I had to be ballsy and follow my own advice. Also, when I started this channel, I reserved the right to, once in a while, just delve into something that interests me in the spirit of discovery and avoiding single topic burnout. Something of which I'm highly susceptible to. So, the ride sometimes veers off track. But you know, it always circles back eventually, and, you know, let's be fair. Sometimes off-roading is fun. So today we're going to take a look at the results of that photo shoot and talk about some things related to processing photos or editing photos or maybe trying to make art or I don't know. We're just going to take a look at and work on some photos. Now, that footage you saw at the opening of the video is from the morning after the shoot. I set up a camera and I recorded my entire 5-hour session where I initially went through all the pics. Yes. Talking to a camera like I was on a live stream, by myself. Yes, sometimes I question my sanity too. I kind of dared myself to do it because I was pretty worried I might have genuinely wasted everybody's time and energy on that project. But I'm relieved to say, at least from my perspective, overall, for a first attempt at staged photography, I think we got some cool stuff. Anyone else might disagree, of course, this being an artistic endeavor. All opinions are valid. Alright, so first we can take a look at some of the raw photos. I'll cut to some more of that footage from that fateful day. Fateful day. I'm so grandiose. Anyway, we'll take a look at some of the raw photos and my genuine reactions to those, and then I'll show you a couple of the treated ones. Hey, you coming up here? You coming up here to be in the video? You want to look at photos? You've been looking at them all the time. All day, every day we got photos going. Rowan Witchbane. Anyway. Moving on. Frame is much better. All right, crossbow time. Fun little wedding cake look, a little crossbow action. Oh, that's a good one right there. Yeah, look at that. This was the first pose I knew I wanted to do. This very flippant attitude. Then it's like here, for a pose like this, what side do I want the light on? Technically, I think this is still would be considered the wrong side. The light should still be on coming from the right here. I love the eye position. I asked her to do something weird with her arm. Oh, I like that too. It's just weird. Got a little attitude in there. That little tilt is interesting. You get that little attitude. Yeah, I think I like this. This is kind of weird. We might be able to do something interesting with this in post. Now this is a good one. This is pretty cool. Profile to profile. That's good. I know who this is, whose head I'm holding right here. That's like a cool graphic image. That's cool. I like that. And I saw this hat on the floor. Like, can we try this hat? So I had an idea for this shot that when on set, I couldn't remember how I did the shot. Then I asked her, what would she do? Help me out here. Somebody give me some ideas. Somebody make this better. That's awesome. There we go. We threw the small one. That's a good one. She's got great hands. This is great. This was cool. Yeah, so she did her head tilt like this. This is like a very classic take on this sort of princess with the sword thing. A little bit of sarcasm in there, right? This is just like what I envisioned her attitude towards this shoot was. There we go. That's one right there. Look at that little fashion pose with the sword coming off the back. Come on, man. Yeah, the sideways eyes. I'm thinking about things that might get stuck on the end of this blade. That is pretty slick. This is pretty cool. Wow. Ooh, that's pretty sweet. That can be pretty creepy. And then there's the outright laughter of somebody stabbing you in the chest. And then she just kind of held it like this, and I was like, pretty rad. There we go. So she was taking some cues from Laura, because she watched all that session there too. I think she'll like this one. I don't know. I'm so paranoid about the actresses, the models, liking what I end up showing them in, but I think this was great. This one, here we go. A little bit of the dark look with the smile, but again, I'm bringing in too much shadow. I don't have the light moved over. So this is pretty cool. I like this one a lot. Yeah, this is even cooler. And then I'll be widening the panning out the background and stuff. And the crown actually makes these cool horns coming out. This is a great one. She's like wreathed in smoke. That's great. Now this is what we could play with and have like smoke coming up, and yeah, that's good. Oh, I like this one. I like this one a lot. All right, let's look at the process of treating an image. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the time-consuming details. There are thousands of videos about skin retouching and Photoshop effects, stuff like that. But I can show you what I've done to a couple of the photos by going through the layers I've created and building the final look. And you can see just how infinitely subjective this whole process is. Of serious note is how long it takes me to post-process one of these pics. It takes me hours. I'm getting faster with practice, but still, holy cow. And of course, I've been watching a ton of YouTube tutorials and learning way more about Photoshop than I ever thought I would, which is actually pretty cool. The interesting and frankly kind of overwhelming thing about this whole post-processing activity is similar in some ways to sitting at the hobby desk with a freshly primed miniature. The possibilities are endless. You could literally do 1,000 different things. I mean, to be honest, there's probably way more things you can do to a photo in Photoshop than things you can do to a miniature, but you get what I'm saying. You've got that monochromatic mini in hand and think, all right, what color do I start with? And you look over at your paints and you've got 100 different choices staring back at you, right? So I use the star rating system in Lightroom Classic to organize the photos, doing multiple passes and whittling down my selections to what I've categorized as the 4-star images, which is the collection of images I've determined are cool enough to work on. Now, out of my original 623 files, I've slapped 70 with 4 stars. And I still constantly go back and forth on some. Add one from the 3-star bin, take out one from the 4. Anyway, roughly there's about 70 pictures I want to finish out. Once I start working on a photo, it goes into the 5-star folder, so I can keep track of what I've worked on and what I haven't. All right, here's one of the few medium shots I did, because mostly I was shooting pretty wide to get, full bodies in frame. I just did not have enough time to get close-ups on top of everything else. Now, I always start treating a photo here in Lightroom. I do some basic color correction and some minor tweaks, and you can see in this photo there's no smoke in the pipe, but that's fine because, hey, we're going to use Photoshop to pull the smoke from this previous shot, and it's going to work great. Now, after those basic tweaks in Lightroom, I send the image to Photoshop, and that's where I do most of the work. Here, you can see I added the smoke from that other shot straight away, and I merged the layers. I should have probably kept that smoke as a separate layer, but, well, we're living and learning, right? So the first thing I do is the blemish removal pass. All this stuff has one rule. Subtlety is king. Like, you could remove every freckle on a person, but that isn't what we want. The blemish pass and the next step are by far the two most time-consuming and tedious steps in the whole process. After the blemish removal comes the standard frequency separation thing, and this is where we smooth out the colors of the skin underneath the actual skin texture. Again, There are thousands and thousands of video tutorials on that whole process out there on YouTube. So after that, I do some dodging and burning, which essentially just means brightening or darkening to further even out the skin. Again, a very standard procedure. I can also add any shadows and highlights I feel like putting in there. Like, I touched up some of the highlights and shadows on the hat to even out some of the ripples in the texture. Again, it's pretty subtle stuff. I also used some dodging to make her eye pop, and then to make it pop even more, I went in with some layers to brighten and add saturation to the iris. Again, trying not to go overboard, but it's all subjective choices at this point, right? And that's a large part of the time that goes into one of these edits. For me anyway, because I can sit here and look at different color treatments over and over and tweak this and tweak that and which is better and I don't know, and it just gets overwhelming. So then I masked just the hat so I could darken the hat a bit. I don't know why, it just felt like making it darker would add more richness maybe. I'm not sure, but that's just what I felt like doing, so I did it. And then I learned about contouring, which is something anyone who puts on makeup already knows about. There's a ton of tutorials on that, but essentially it's just a map of where to enhance highlights and deepen shadows on a human face. This is something I thought, wow, okay, I'll be using this when painting miniature faces from now on. Actually, I can use all this stuff when painting miniatures, because in the end, we're ultimately just playing with contrast and color. And whether that's in a photograph or on a miniature or in a painting, it's all the same concept, right? So you can see what the contouring layers do to Laura's skin here. Since I learned about this technique, I started to use it in all kinds of places, not just the skin tones. You'll see that in a second. So that takes care of Laura, but now we gotta do the background. So I masked Laura and then started playing with the background just to find something that looked cool, felt cohesive, and maybe made the whole thing more dramatic. I tweaked the overall color of the background with this color balance layer and then darkened it with a curves layer. And then I just wasn't digging the plain backdrop I had on set, but I can't get myself to entirely replace a background. I'm just not good enough with Photoshop yet to take something like that on and not make it look stupid. So I brought in a graphic with flowers I bought on Etsy. I used the multiply mode, and that makes it kind of settle nicely into the existing backdrop, in my opinion anyway. Then I added a radial gradient in black and white and set it to the soft light blend mode to kind of both separate Laura from the background and kind of replicate the actual flash hitting the backdrop. So then I applied a gradient map layer to color shift the background, and I literally just learned about this technique too a few weeks ago. And then I applied that same gradient map over the whole image, but lowered it to like, I don't know, 70% or 50% opacity, somewhere in there. Now I could go on and on messing with colors and contrast and shadows and highlights and backgrounds, and I mean, I could literally mess with this photo for a year if I wanted to. And this is what I mean about having too much possibility. It's just nuts. But at some point, we just gotta move on. So here's the before and the after. My one artistic goal at the beginning of this whole project was I wanted to try to achieve this painterly portrait look. I think that look just sort of jives with the costume aspect, and so that's been like my guiding keyword during this post-processing phase. Whether I've been successful or not is really not up to me to decide. Okay, let's look at another one. Now this just might be one of the best images I've ever been lucky enough to have a hand in creating. Obviously with a lot of help from everybody on set. So this is Lily, and she just squatted down in that awesome dress Debradawn gave her, and everything literally just worked here. Her look, and the tipped over cup she did on her own, and the smoke element, all of that's captured in camera in one shot, and it's super cool. So I did the first round of tweaking in Lightroom, which was really pretty subtle, and then I sent it over to Photoshop. The first thing I did in Photoshop was, well, in reality I did it at some point in the middle of the process, but it's just easier to show you at the beginning here. I widened the image a bit and used the AI generative fill to stretch the background, and it recreated the smoke at the edge pretty nicely. It just makes a better composition to my eye. Here's the healing / blemish removal layer. I did that process and cleaned up the backdrop a little bit because my backdrop on set was full of creases from shipping that never came out. Anyway, then I did the frequency separation and color smoothing, followed by some very tiny dodging and burning on the skin. I was working on such tiny areas you can't even really see the difference unless I zoom way in. Then the contouring, which makes quite a difference. You can see I added some highlights to her hair and just sort of made her pop overall. Then some contouring on the wardrobe, again, just to add some contrast and almost a glow to the highlights. Now this color match layer is just a layer where I use the color blending mode to paint over some subtle color differences to make any color difference areas less noticeable. Again, it's virtually impossible to see, but here you can see the results pretty clearly on the purple shadow on the scarf. And then a final pop on her eyes with a curves adjustment layer, and then she gets masked and we go to work on the background. I didn't like these wisps of smoke above her head. I thought they were distracting in the final image, so I tried to remove them. I had to add some brightening to get this big crease out, and then some darkening, aka dodging and burning, right? And then I wanted to pop the smoke a little bit, so that's done with a curves adjustment layer. Again, just more dodging. And then I color shifted the whole background into the bluer side with a selective color layer. Again, this is something you can just infinitely tweak. I wanted to add some dramatic lighting and kill as much of that crappy background as I could. So a vertical gradient in overlay blend mode worked for that. I realize this probably sounds like a lot of technical jargon, but I think visually seeing what's happening just kind of shows you that I'm basically just working on this thing like it's a painting or a coloring book. The last thing I had to correct was this little patch of smoke bursting around her arm, which just had this weird color cast to it in the original image. So I had to paint over it with some blue in the color blend mode to get it to match a little better. And now the most fun part, which is the global effects. Stuff that's going to affect the entire image as a whole because we have a fairly coherent image now to work with after all that previous stuff. I started with a gradient map. You can see how it shifts the colors. Basically, it applies the colors in the gradient to the shadows and the highlights of the image, and I think it looks pretty great. And basically everything is frosting at this point. Now, a very subtle shift in the whites, which are essentially just the highlights on her skin. I just made them a little more cream colored and a little less blue. Again, super subtle. I mean, based on YouTube compression, you may not see any change at all. Now some curves adjustments darken the overall image, and then this lookup table from inside Photoshop. Some kind of Fujifilm emulator. There's just a bunch of these things in Photoshop, and I just kind of slide through them until I find one I like. I don't always use these, but this time, this one worked pretty well. And then one final layer. Another lookup table set to teal and orange. Again, something I just stumbled on and thought, wow, this is cool for how crazy the color is. And that's the cherry on top. I really like how this one came out. I think it's pretty rad. And now something I started doing with pretty much every photograph in this series is I've started to check them out in black and white. And you might think this is just a simple turn off the color sort of thing, but there's as much variation in black and white as you have in color. It's kind of weird. For example, just the black and white filter in the standard Photoshop adjustment layer has these presets that all look pretty different. I found that I typically like this weird formula that I'll tweak on a per image basis. I use a combination of the infrared preset and the green preset. Two different layers masked to see the effects of one here and the other there. But I think this image works super well in black and white too. I really dig it, and I don't think I can pick a favorite between the color version and the black and white. I like both quite a bit. All right, let's take a quick look at a third photo that I think works just far better in black and white than it does in color. This one, once I dropped it into black and white, I was like, whoa, this is badass in black and white. I mixed a couple of the black and white presets again, using the infrared layer for her dress and then masking it back out to the brighter green black and white layer to make all those folds in the dress pop. Now, I don't know what you think, but I really like this pic. I think it looks just awesome in black and white. It's just, I don't know, it's very punchy and dramatic. I don't know, I just dig it. Okay, so just like at the end of a mini painting video, here's some of the images I've completed. Some of these have color and black and white variants, and while I think all of these are looking pretty cool at the moment, I've noticed that every time I look at a quote finished unquote photo, a day or two later, I see something I want to change. So I look at these off and on, I take notes, I go back and I tweak them, all while still trying to work on, the next ones. It's been a long process, but overall, I'm chalking this whole project up in the win column. There's quite a few images I'm pretty proud of, and it took a bunch of other talented artists to help me get there, so I just keep hoping they're all going to dig the results as much as I do. And you're seeing all kinds of different color treatments here, and some backgrounds have images or textures added, and all I can say is, I'm just having fun experimenting. I have no idea what I'm doing other than just letting myself eat all the crayons in the box. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll be able to see them as I release them. Which reminds me, I've been wrestling with this quandary of where to share the results of this project. every marketer in the world would tell me to absolutely not clutter my miniature painting tabletop alchemy Instagram with portrait photos. And they'd be right. But damn it, I'm interested in just too many things, and I want to do them all, and I don't want to have to run separate social media accounts for every little thing, which would be dumb anyway because I just don't do one thing all the time. All that said, it's probably the route I'm going to have to take. But let's be honest, my brand, if I have such a thing, is probably at its core all about not having a brand, or singular niche at any rate. It's about engaging in all kinds of creative stuff, as long as there are swords involved, right? So at least I roll with a common theme. Sometimes. Anyway, let me know what you think of these picks and anything else, and go do something off-brand. Because what the hell, you going to miss out on doing something you want to do just because other folks or algorithms think you should stay in a box? You decide. See ya.